Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you may be watching this transmission. This video is dedicated to my friends down under that watch this channel, the Mike Martin's channel. I've been covering the housing market there for the last, 8-9 years. And same thing with New Zealand and the United Kingdom and the United States and Canada. Guys, don't forget to join me on Trends in the Housing Market every Wednesday night. And don't forget to join me on Mike in the Night every Saturday night. Anyways, what is going on? Turns out Sydney isn't much of a fun place to live. Well, you'd always think, living in the Northern Hemisphere, in an Anglo country, in a North American country, in the Northern Hemisphere, in a Commonwealth country, let's put it that way. You would think it'd be, wow, down under, the sun, the lights, the glitz, the people, the magic. It must be incredible living in Sydney. Well, local Sydney-siders, I think that's what they call themselves, are coming forward, and it's been coming out for years now. I have articles going back to 2014. And what happened? Well, Sydney is in the same boat in the Commonwealth as Canada and New Zealand and the United Kingdom, where they were open for business. And what do I mean by that? Come in and buy our real estate out. Come in and invest in Australia. And what a lot of people did was a lot of people from China were looking for places to park their money. And where did they take it? To the Commonwealth. And then they bought out the Australian proper. Now, the Australian proper is completely bought out to a point where people going into the housing or first-time buyers don't see an end in sight or a way. Even with a will, there's no way. But due to crummy financial institutions pulling crummy jobs and going against their own, proper way of doing things, going against their own rules to get people approved for mortgages. Then you got them slashing interest rates, but the consumer isn't saving money. Like in the United States, when they slash interest rates, the bank, the overnight rate, the bank goes ahead and lowers rate too. And saving consumers money so they can afford a better mortgage. But in Australia, they still keep the rates at 4.4, 4.5% when the banks are only paying 1.5 or 1.8%. Now that's highway robbery if you ask someone. That is bad. So, what is going on? Well, it's not just the affordability to live in Sydney, and it's not just the city getting bought out and turning into an empty shell. It's getting a lot worse in other angles. Well, let's look at this. Turns out Sydney isn't much of a fun place to live. If you have felt that there's not a lot going on in Sydney lately, you're not alone. Turns out Sydney doesn't quite have the whole what makes a great city formula in the bag, like the good folks down in Melbourne do. Time Out has released their first Global City Index and the funnest cities to live in across the world, with Melbourne coming in second and Sydney trailing at third last. The survey quizzed 20,000 people from 18 cities about their thoughts on 6 dimensions of a great city. So it's dynamism, inspiration, food and drink, community, social ability, and affordability. They were asked 81 questions, from where they eat to how safe they felt in their city to how often they rock up to a live gig. According to Time Out, Sydney-siders are drunk, horny, and miserable, and only having more fun than the Dubai and Kuala Lumpur. Only 10% of Sydney-siders strongly agree that there's always something fun to do in Sydney. In contrast to Melbourne's 46%, could this be something to do with the state of the lockout laws? And while 62% of Melburnians agreed there was also something new to do in their city, only 22% felt that the same about Sydney. To top it off, Sydney came out on top for the most frequent hangovers and one-night stands. Enough said. Woo! But Sydney did far better than the community front, with 96% in the inner east residents and 94% of the inner west residents strongly agreeing that they loved living in their neighborhood. At least that's something. So here it is, Chicago. What makes Black Friday cheap? To book yourself in one-way ticket to Chicago took the top spots in the world's funniest city. I've been to Chicago many times. I've been to Illinois. I think it's great. Then we got Lisbon. Coming in third place, Lisbon timed out as the highest ranked European city, topped sociability index. See, I'm a Portuguese. You see, look at me. I talk. My problem is I talk too much. You go to Sydney, you go to Lisbon, everybody's like that. I don't know if they speak English, though. Você precisa aprender a falar português. You got to learn how to speak Portuguese. But man, what a sociable crowd. What a beautiful weather. Everybody's just with everybody. You're never alone there. Looking to make new friends to love? This city may be your ticket. Then Mexico, ranked number 6. Mexico is the cheapest place to go for a good time. See, I had a great time. I lived in Mexico for 2 years, and I speak like proper Mexican, like the slang, the whole 9 yards. And a mí me gustan los mexicanos porque me encanta a sentir como estás con la familia. You feel like you're with family there. It's all family, more family oriented with the Mexican culture. It's si se puede, México para siempre. It's like that really strong feeling of typical night out in Mexico City costs $34. So here's the full list. Chicago, number 1. Melbourne, Australia. Number 3, Lisboa, Portugal. Number 4, New York City. Madrid, Spain, number 5. Mexico City, 6. Sao Paulo, I've been to Sao Paulo too. Very sociable in Sao Paulo, but very dangerous. Even though I speak Portuguese, I'm still scared to sometimes in certain parts. But then when you're in the right nightlife, the right mood, the right people, the right group, oh man, it makes it so worth it. Los Angeles, number 8. Barcelona, Spain. Wow, Barcelona is there. Wow, it's there twice, Spain. 10, London, and then Hong Kong, number 11. We're going to remove Hong Kong from the list because right now it's not a safe place to travel to. And Miami, and I lived there for 5 years. Fort Lauderdale, really, but still. There it is. Now, let's move on. Sydney leaves me depressed and lonely, and in summer it is worse. Oh, that's scary. Isolation, loneliness is a way you don't want to be. Sydney leaves me depressed. There has to be a word for someone who finds themselves transplanted across the world like a tree uprooted in its prime. So, this happened to me when I moved to Vancouver. I noticed that it just very lonely city. I came to Vancouver being single, and man, was it ever hard to it was just hard for everything, dating, this, that. So watch my video, 10 Reasons Why I Left Vancouver on my channel. Broadsheet recently published an article brilliantly written by Jonathan Seidler about depression in the summer months. The article could not have hit me at a better time. I was struggling to be a productive and often getting caught up in insignificant moments of error, playing them in my mind over and over again. I was struck. That happened to me too. When I was single in Vancouver, it's like, okay, I know women here only date tall guys. How do I get around not being tall? I'm only 5'7". Women only date guys that are 5'10" and taller. How do I do this? And I kept playing in my head, like, how do I get around? I've been single for 5 years in Vancouver. 5 years. In Miami, it was, hey, ¿cómo estás? Aquí está Maria Lupe. Aquí está Maria está soltera. It's like, Maria single, this and that, go barbecue. Hey, listen to me, I say in Miami. It's like, yeah, man, 4 or 5 girls at a time. Different dating, different scene, different people, meeting different families. It's all good. You get to Vancouver, it's goodbye. I spent the day in front of bed replaying non-urgent emails and avoiding the urgent ones. I had recently finished up a full-time job and was working for myself. I had enough money to not work for a whole year. Yet, I felt this urge to keep working because the moment I stopped, everything would come undone. So, as another people, there's a long one here. Let's move on. Why Sydney is becoming the most boring city in the world. Well, I'm going to tell you guys why. It's the same thing that happened in France. So, let's pull this up. And there is an article here that I want to pull up for you guys. And this answers your question. Okay? So, this is why. Here it is. Now, this happened in Paris, so this is what's happening in Sydney because they correlate with each other, and I'll show you in a second. Vacant homes are a global epidemic, and Paris is fighting it with a 60% tax. Now, in Sydney, right now, there's a lot of vacant properties, and I'll show you. Now, this is what's happening. So, guys living in Australia, put your Australia caps on. Forget they're talking about Paris. This is Sydney, okay? Runaway real estate speculation has been filing global capitals with vacant homes. Hey, sounds like Sydney, isn't it? Creating artificial shortages. Supply and demand bullcrap, right? Now there's an oversupply on the Sydney market and Melbourne. In the world's most sought-after cities, Sydney and Melbourne. The shortage has made local homeowners wealthy overnight, and then you go to the parties and everyone's separated from the homeowners and the renters, and the homeowners are like, yeah, I'm going to take another loan on my house. I'm going to take a HELOC, a second mortgage. We're going to take a cruise now. Our homes are paying for our futures now. We're using our homes as an ATM machine. And then you're renting and you're looking like, wow, are my tax dollars going to have to pay your debt when you default on this mortgage? And am I going to have to pay for this even though I'm not playing your game? That's what it's looking like is going to happen. The bailouts from your tax money. And then Sydney, now they do the $10,000 limit, $10K limit, and then now they're going to abolish cash in Australia. All right, so it's going there. It's good. The 5G's rolling in. Wow. Okay, but it comes at a cost of turning lively cities, Sydney, into empty shells. Sydney. The city of Paris so let's change this here. The city of Sydney has decided it's had enough and implemented a tax in 2015. They didn't get quite the results they wanted, so now they're tripling it to 60%. Imagine Sydney did that to the empty homes. You'll see it quick in a heartbeat, every house on the market overnight. Not every house, but then you're going to have the homeowners that live in Sydney put their homes on the market too, because if they bought it the wrong time, they don't want, you see what I'm saying with the aggregation? So, Paris empty home problem. Now, Paris has been trying to deal with vacant property owners for some time. Despite warnings that the city will now have to take action, the number of vacant homes is growing. There's 107,000 vacant homes, representing 7.5% of residential dwellings in the city, according to the Francis Incy Deputy Mayor Ian Bossat. 40,000 of those vacant homes aren't even connected to the electrical grid. You know what happens when that happens? Your electrical bill goes up, even though you don't consume more, because you're going to have to pay for the loss of the other people that are not using their electrical grid, and the electrical companies start taking a loss. Local developers have argued that more new construction is the solution. Again, oversupply. And that's what they said about Sydney. Build, 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 build. Now there's an oversupply on their market. However, Bosseret argues in a city as dense as Paris, where it was very difficult to build, controlling and occupy the housing in its strategic, it appears the city believes to have 107,000 reasons to construct. Construction is not the solution. Same thing with Sydney and Melbourne. Why? Because there's only so many parts of Australia you could live in habitable areas. That's not an outback, a desert, or whatever you want to call it. So there's very limited space to live in Australia, and it's being gobbled up by foreign investing. So where are you, Sydney? Right there, 118,499 empty homes. And this is from 2017. And I read this article the day it came out. I've been talking about real estate, housing, and everything in Australia since 2014. A lot of my Australian stuff got taken down. But anyways, now let's go back. So here's the deal. This is why Sydney has become the most boring city in the world. It's turning into an empty shell. I've spoken to people that work in the nightlife area there. People working as bartenders, people working as caregivers, people working all different angles, and they're seeing it more and more and more. And the city is hustling and bustling during the week as people come into work, but in the afternoon hours when everyone takes the train or the bus or gets back or carpools back home, the city turns into an empty shell. And on the weekends, a lot of restaurants are turning into ghost restaurants right now in Sydney, where restaurants are just throwing in the towel and saying, I can't afford it anymore. The price of food's going up. The price of transporting goods is going up. The price of logistics is going up. The prices, everything is being put onto the customer, and customers, are having a really tough time paying to eat at restaurants nowadays, and consumer confidence is down because nobody has money. So is Sydney becoming the most boring city in the world? Where's the other one here? Sydney is sadder, meaning angrier city. Sydney is the Elizabeth Taylor of Australian cities. But if Sydney is Elizabeth Taylor, then Melbourne is Helen Mirren. Far from faded glory, Mirren is using her later years to put in some of the best performances in her career. And boy, she could rock a swimsuit. Oh, they're just comparing it to. So it's basically people, are you angry? Do you live in Sydney? Who's angry? Who feels the debt? Nobody's got money. Everybody's house broke. Everybody's borrowed more than they could. They've over leveraged. And now it's crippling them. And not only that, it's putting people feeling down. People are feeling down. People are not happy as they used to be anymore. And are you lonely? Do you feel you're not in these clicky groups? Sydney's full of cliques, little clique groups that you got to be part of. Everyone's telling me the same thing, left, right, and center. Born and raised Australian proper are telling me how tough it's been. Just never mind getting into the housing, just buying food. Or if they get an unexpected bill that hit them, what do? And it's reality and it's kicking in. People played this housing Ponzi scheme for too long, and now there's a lot of people I just hope that the people that didn't jump into this game aren't the ones that actually pay for it in the end, while the other ones get to buy cars and travel and use their homes as ATM machines. This is my opinion on why Sydney isn't much of a fun place anymore. I believe it's turned into an empty shell. It sold itself out to the highest bidders, and I believe it's all over the Commonwealth. So it's in Vancouver, it's in Toronto, and we don't have many cities in Canada to live in, but we're completely pretty much out of a choice when it comes to that. In the UK, everyone's left London proper and moved to Middle England. In Dublin, everyone's moved to Southwest Ireland, to the southwest of Ireland, yeah. In Scotland, everyone's kind of scattering out to the suburbs in outside of Edinburgh. So it's happening all over the Commonwealth. Affordability is not there, but not only that, it takes away from social activities, nightlife. It takes away from your soul in the end. Let me know what you guys think. Comment below. Thanks for watching.